project, is a representative of the builder of this, and he left the company in between the application submittal, and they have another person, but I don't think he either could make it, or, you know, he's taking over all his projects.
And he's swamped.
So I don't know. The engineer who's drawing the plans in their company is who we've been dealing with primarily, and they've been really good to work with. But the company itself, I don't know if you know anything about. I mean, it's a international corporation from Germany.
Well, I knew it wasn't
And so,
probably American.
Yeah, so they're not like a local, like, only business. This is just one of their little manufacturing plants. So I've actually had a harder time getting information from somebody with actually a McDermott and Thone email address. Like,
That would
nobody from the
also-
company is really, like,
Yeah.
doing the project. They've hired somebody, and it's out of a different office, right? They don't have people here in this building that are,
Okay.
like, building this.
Which would also explain kind of the difference in the plans. They're set up a little bit different than usual, but
Yeah.
anyway.
So I'm happy to go through it, and then we can, if you have
Okay.
questions, I'll answer. I do have, I don't have a ton on this, to be honest, but, yeah.
Okay, let's open the meeting at 6:07. We'll
And
go.
then we'll do the.
We'll do that. So we have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, there you go.
Like school. Okay, everybody. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And then, does anyone, we're at the adopt the agenda, so is there anything else that anybody wanted to add? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I make a motion that we adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then,
that's the
the
business
planning
meeting.
commission meeting minutes for March 7th. I just had, a couple of things that I wanted to put in, where we had Barbara Corey,
Yep.
arrived at, if we don't have a time, can we just say later?
Oh, yep. That was fine. I need to put that in. I was gonna look back on the video and like track when she walked in.
Oh, okay, because I can't remember either.
I will add that. Yes.
Okay, and then, on page 2,
Yep.
let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth paragraph,
Mhm.
not counting Commission Bliss,
Yep.
commissioner, or whatever. Kind of in the middle where we're talking about, it starts, or doesn't start, but landscaping between the fire lane and Highway 12, add an accessible path from the accessible parking lot space to the ramp? I wasn't quite sure. I know
Sure,
I know what you mean.
Stall. would be a good term.
Stall?
Mhm.
Stall, yeah. Is that what we were meaning?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, yep. Stall. Yeah.
Okay. And that was all I had.
I have a question, I guess, on, there was this letter from Claire Rood,
Mhm.
and expressing disapproval for the project. And we sort of answered that by saying that mixed use was permitted in this
Mhm.
area. Should we document that, so we sort of close the loop on
Sure. Yeah, I
that
can add a.
question?
I can add a
Good
sentence.
point.
I can add a sentence on that. Yeah. Just say what his concern was. Yep.
Yeah, and then
You
the
know.
resolution.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to,
Make a motion to approve the minutes from
Okay. The 7th of March.
March 7th.
Okay,
Second.
all those in favor? Aye. Okay. Then we have new business, which is the McDermott Enthone application for 5630 Pioneer Creek Drive. And, I don't know, Mark, why don't you go through it and we'll open and close the meeting and
Sure.
then continue on. Thanks.
Honorable Chair, Commissioners, this item coming before you tonight is a request for site plan review and conditional use permit to allow a building addition to the existing building located at 5630 Pioneer Creek Drive. So the applicant, McDermott Enthone, is requesting those two actions for the subject property. Property itself is located west of Hallgren Road on Pioneer Creek Drive, and there is only one building currently located on the property. The property itself is zoned industrial. It's guided by the city's comprehensive plan as industrial, and it's approximately a little over 5 acres in size for the overall property. The applicant approached the city like exactly 4 weeks ago and said, we have a building project, we're gonna be expanding our building, we wanna put a 2,000 square foot addition onto the backside of the building. Are there, what are the setbacks, what are the city's requirements, so on and so forth. And we said, well, let us take a look. I met with the applicant, I looked at their, the building addition, and then I talked to him a little more about what was going to occur within the building addition and then what occurs within the building. And I came to the conclusion that there was two processes they needed to go through. One, any addition expansion of commercial industrial property in the city triggers site plan review. So we would need to go through that process, which comes in front of Planning Commission and City Council. And then secondly, the mixing of chemicals triggers kicks this into what we would consider heavy manufacturing and would require a conditional use permit. They've been doing that on this property for some time, and we went back and looked in the file. We noted there wasn't a conditional use permit ever granted, and so we notified them that they should get a conditional use permit for that. We have, so with that, that's why they're coming through site plan and conditional use. The addition is about a 2,000 square foot addition onto a 60,000 square foot building, so it's a very small percentage. As such, it doesn't trigger a lot of the city's requirements as it relates to bringing the overall site up to a current standard. It doesn't exceed our 15% threshold of the building. And so with that, we're really looking at just the addition, but we do look at parking use and things of that nature. And in the conditional use permit, we have criteria for granting a conditional use. And so we can walk through those. But, I asked them for more information on the chemical product processing that they do. And they make certain types of exterior material finishings, like coatings that go on certain metals. I don't know, there's a whole list of things that if you look at what they do and they do a lot of different productivity things, but this particular building does this, essentially they mix chemicals to make these coatings. And so they're putting on a room that's gonna mix a different type of chemical than what they otherwise manufacture within that building. And so, they are trying to set up the building addition so that it's almost disconnected from the building as a separate building, even though it has a like corridor-like connection to the building. But they're trying to separate it so that from a fire rating standpoint, separation and things of that nature, it becomes kind of its own little isolated room. I have not gone through the existing building inside, so I can't exactly describe their processing. We've never had any complaints. We have no known issues with the manufacturing that they've done in the building for quite some time. And we have no reason to think that they're doing anything that is causing any problems outside of the building that would be of concern from a conditional use standpoint or that we need to further mitigate. They have about 10,000 square feet of office in this building on the second floor, but they only have 2 employees that work in that square footage. They have about 20 employees that work in the processing, the product processing part, which is the lower level of this plant. So we looked at it. It's zoned industrial. Heavy manufacturing is a conditional use permit in the industrial zone, but it's certainly set up to accommodate in heavy manufacturing, especially in this location. If you look at requisite setbacks, they're exceeding the setbacks, so we consider this to be a legal building. It's not non-conforming or anything like that. The proposed addition meets applicable setbacks, and they show the setbacks on the proposed plan. We can just look at that real quick. So the proposed building addition, I can get to it right there, shows the addition right here. This is the 2,000. You can see what I was saying with this like corridor, but still a separation. And then they show the setback here, so it's actually 90 feet setback from the rear property line on this angle and 77 on this. 20 is the required setback, so they more than exceed requisite setbacks. What they will be doing is right now this fire lane drive access aisle for trucks and deliveries comes around and it actually cuts through about like this. They're going to be widening this out and taking this curb line and moving it just in this area right here so that they can accommodate the proposed building addition. Then they'd fill that back in with, patch in the bituminous and the concrete curb as necessary to make that happen. Right now they have some concrete spillways that provide drainage off of their parking lot and their loading area, and then that goes back into that overall wetland. Those wouldn't be impacted by this, and the minimal amount of disturbance that we're talking about adding here would not trigger any other stormwater requirements as it relates to the additional impervious surface, although it's really fairly minimal because that already goes through there. When we looked at it, if you look at the site plan and the aerial and where this sits in the world of the industrial park, it really has minimal impact on any kind of surrounding property. The location of this proposed addition, as it relates even to public, streets or anything, views in there, you really can't see this from anywhere. If anything, you could see it from back here, but there's, some grade differentiation. So they are proposing to construct this using tip-up panels which match the building. They actually were looking at maybe using like a block or something else, and then they decided that they would just use most of the same panel as a building, so it's going to be a concrete precast type panel. So it has, it's just going to blend into what's there, but because there's so little visibility and because there's nothing, anywhere around that part of the building and anything here, I think it just sets up to be it's just going to blend in with what's already there. I looked at the parking. They provided me with a parking summary based on traditional manufacturing. We have a provision in our ordinance called automated product manufacturing, which is more closely related to what they do. I asked them for an employee count because if you were to take this building, the 61,000 square feet and the 10,000 square feet office, and try to break it down into a traditional, like say 4 spaces per 1,000 parking requirement, we would end up with a need for about 175 spaces. And they have 73, and you can see how this site lays out. There is room for parking here and here in front if you had to add additional parking. But they have 20 employees at any given time on that site. And so that's their max shift. And so I think that's reasonable for us. You can see now the car's parked. I've gone out there and looked at it, and it looked like that during the day. So I don't know that this would trigger anything else. I think if this use were to ever change over, or if they were to intensify the use and we identified a parking issue, we could go back to them. But I don't know that we'd want to even really think about more parking at this point, given that if we apply the automated product manufacturing standard, one space per employee, based on the maximum planned employment on each shift, and we say it's 20, they said even 30 if they grew it a little bit would be their max. We're well within the existing parking that's out on that site. So, we looked at that. We think this is really a pretty simple addition as it relates to our standards, but it does trigger this review, and it does trigger us notifying the adjacent property owners. We didn't get any response or any questions or letters or any correspondence from anybody around the property that was notified. Their use of the property is consistent with, other uses. Proto Labs does a very similar type of processing, and honestly, it's a pretty nice business to have in town. An international business like theirs is probably pretty good. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know it's kind of a abbreviated package, but they do have a full plan set. We could look at it if we need to look at any more information. We did review it. Ultimately, the building code review is going to be probably more onerous than anything we're doing. They've got these chemical product processing requirements that trigger the occupancy ratings of the building. One thing I did note is that the existing building is sprinkled and the new building is going to
Yeah.
be sprinkled. So from a fire suppression standpoint, they're already doing that. I don't know if this building standalone by itself triggers that or not, but I guess that's more of a building code, but they said they're doing it regardless, So, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know it's not
Okay.
very exciting.
No, well, I'll open the public hearing at 6:22. And since there is no one here, also close it, to ask. And you pointed out something that might have answered a question in my head. In looking at what it is that they do, that we didn't really realize that they did, and we haven't heard anything, is there anything that anybody check with, like the PCA or OSHA or anybody to see if there had been anything that just didn't get out to us? I mean, it just,
Yeah, I didn't. I will tell you if there was an issue, we would have known.
we would have heard about it?
If it was
Okay.
OSHA, maybe not, but
Yeah, I think I'd agree
right.
with you on
So,
that
but
one.
PCA for sure. If there was any kind of a environmental hazard or anything, but I mean, this site is clean. There's not
Yeah.
a lot of activity on the outside. They don't have any outdoor storage or anything, and so we just don't have any record of any issues ever arising with them. And I would think, we certainly could. I would think during the building code review, they are going to be more thorough on, are they appropriately, dealing with, like their waste byproducts and stuff. I will tell you, I just talked through this with the engineer, and they have a pretty sophisticated, in-floor drainage tank holding system
Yeah, I would.
for
Yeah.
chemical overruns and things like that, and then they have a self-contained cistern that everything goes, and this is going to tie into that system. So, I was talking about that process, but again, it's probably outside of our requirement. It's more building code related, that they meet all applicable codes related to what they're doing inside that
Okay.
building
Well, and that's good to hear that.
As part
versus
of that, then
outside.
They'll go through some MPCA review as part of their building.
If the processing requires that permitting, they'll have to do that. We sometimes add a condition. We could add it to this. It just says they'll have to get all applicable permits so that we're covered. But just if you talk to these guys, you talk to the team of architects and engineers they have working on this, and then you look at who they are. I'm not saying that big business is always up on the up and up, but they're pretty sophisticated in what they're doing in the processing, and then they're fairly sophisticated on the building requirement side. So
I don't think there would be anything, I don't think it would hurt anything to put it in that they are,
yeah.
following all applicable. They have, there's a tank or a vat or something that they're building, something which in my mind, if you've got a platform, it means someone could potentially fall
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
And that trips a whole bunch of other kinds of things that go, and so I think the fact that they're talking about it and that they wanna build it to code or whatever, but us saying, from the city's standpoint, that they need to meet, all the building codes, et cetera, and all the things like that is, I think, a way of protecting
Yeah.
us. I was pleased to see that they had water systems, or, like the sprinklers and things like that. None of this then, because it's not really going into any of the other, doesn't trip anything in the wetlands or any of those kinds of things either. And if they already have things built internally that aren't going out, then they seem to be okay that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, when this was built, it didn't trigger, it was built to the standard at the time. And so, that pond system behind that building is all a part of that industrial park. It was constructed to accommodate the entirety of that. And that's, it's not that old in reality, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're not, you can see the minimal impervious that they're adding to
Yeah.
this site, a couple thousand square feet. And so they've got, adequate provisions right now on site. This will be nominal.
And I would agree too, I don't think we should add any more parking spaces. Sometimes along, like Pioneer and going up, if there's a lot of people, I think probably coming out of Pro Labs, they'll park on the street. And I have never seen anybody in any of the lanes that are going up there. Not that I'm
Yeah.
back there all that much, but.
I
don't
agree,
think-
this part of the Pioneer, Protolabs parks on Pioneer out in front sometimes.
Yeah,
Or I'm sorry, over here. Out in
Yes.
front sometimes.
yeah.
But now that they built that new lot.
Lot, it's less.
It's a lot less, but
Yeah.
they still said that they have, people who rotate between, or that go around between buildings for like meetings and whatever. And so a lot of times those people, as just a sheer convenience, park out in the street to run in and
Yeah.
go to a meeting, then run out, so. But, yeah, I mean, outside of that, when we looked at it, they were actually kind of surprised they had to go through a site plan review process, but then when I told them about the conditional use, I said, you should get that, so that it's covered, but the building, regardless of what they did in the other side of the building, which they are doing some of this processing, that, regardless of that, this new building triggers it, so.
I guess that was one of my questions, is they're looking for a conditional use on the new portion, which makes sense as you explained it. But it sounds like they've evolved into a heavy manufacturer without the conditional use.
I think they are a heavy manufacturer and didn't know they needed a
So does
conditional
this
use.
then blanket the entire 63,000 square feet?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're gonna basically, so what we're really.
We're gonna say
approving-
they're gonna be able to do heavy manufacturing within that
So what
entire
we're really
building.
approving is a 63,000 square foot heavy manufacturing.
Correct.
So their use right now that triggered the heavy manufacturing was the use of chemicals, mixing of chemicals. If this goes from light industrial now to heavy industrial, does that mean they can do anything else within heavy? So that they could evolve into other non-chemical, heavy type
Yeah.
activities?
So the conditional use permit will allow them to do the chemical process mixing or whatever. Will
I guess
it,
that
will
would-
it, yeah, it's a good
Or
question.
should we limit it to?
We should
chemical?
limit it to. It's a good question. It's a good point.
To what they're
Um,
currently doing now.
Yeah, it should be
Is that what
limited
you're-
to
Yeah, yeah, so, I
the
mean.
chemical mixing, processing, and maybe I need to figure out exactly how to define that.
Right, something that gives them the flexibility they need for their processes, but.
But not
doesn't-
other heavy
not other
manufacturing.
heavy.
Yeah, that
heavy-
they'd
heavy
have to come
industrial,
back.
If they're doing other, loud machinery, fabrication
good
type
point.
stuff.
Yeah.
Because we know that if the business itself went away and somebody else heavy industrial came in, they'd have to tell us, because it would be, the purpose would be different. It would not be chemical.
It would, but you're right, the conditional use runs with the land, so
Yeah.
we should be more specific than less specific. I think it's a good point.
If nothing
I think it's
else,
a really
what
good
it
point.
does is it triggers somebody to come back to us,
Yeah,
so that we know, something's changed.
Right.
Or they want something more, or something like that.
I think also whether or not we even understand what the baseline is, what they are doing. It sounds like we're not completely sure on what the current processes are.
yeah, I mean, the, whatever they call this, the, what do you call it? Hold on, I can, so in there, let me just go to the plan set. They have the name of what they're doing in their plans, and I've talked to them
Yeah.
about it in as much detail as I could
And I
understand.
had found it once, because, no, I can't, of course.
I know. I'll grab it, but it is this chemical product processing, is what they're calling it. Maybe it's called materials processing.
Well, they say construction type 2B materials will be utilized?
That's building code
Okay.
Yeah,
related,
yeah,
but I
No.
think adding a condition that says the use will be limited to the user's
well, and they might even
current, and I
have-
could
yeah.
establish what that, I could have them describe that baseline.
Right, well, it might
and I
even
would
be on
write
their
it into-
website saying what they do. I mean,
Well-
they talk about, chemicals in the tanks are not flammable or combustible. Now, that's in what's gonna be in the new one. And so, it sounds, from what you were saying, because for some reason in my head, if this whole place is mixing chemicals, and these are mixing different kinds of chemicals than what's in the main building,
Yeah. So it's
Um,
polymer, a polymer
Mer-
mix
right?
room is what this is. And so my understanding is it's a similar process to what they have inside the rest. The whole building isn't just polymer mix. This is a place that they're gonna do an additional polymer mix. I think, it'd be great if we had them here to just go over it again. I think what we could do, though, is just recommend a condition be added that limits the heavy industrial use to chemical product mixing, and I could define the areas that it's permitted in within the floor plan. They did give me that breakdown, and then we'll designate a certain amount of square footage essentially to that within the building, and then say specifically all other heavy industrial uses are subject to the review and approval of this city of Maple Plain through applicable processes or something, like we do that.
Yeah.
And then it's gonna limit out everything else.
Okay, I think it's good.
So, but your point's good, and I actually agree that, yeah, if we don't limit it, you could potentially, somebody could come in and say, yeah, I wanna do
Yeah, I mean,
heavy
they've already-
manufacturing, I have a CUP for that, so.
They've already evolved from whatever they were doing. We didn't know what they were doing. So,
My sense is they've been doing this the whole time that they moved in to the building, and they didn't know that in and of itself was a conditional use.
yeah, nothing malicious really, it was just sort of
Right.
out of sight, out of mind.
Right. And to be honest, and I mean, to be fair, Protolabs does similar type of chemical processing. I mean, they're manufacturing, but they're using chemicals that are being mixed and formed and.
And is Porta Labs, is there a CUP for heavy or light industrial?
I don't think they have a CP either, is my guess.
I don't know.
No.
I didn't look at that, but I was equating it, and the office building is one, but they do some manufacturing in that building, then they have the other processing building out on the the one that's closest to the
Yeah, on the
highway.
highway.
And that's where they do more of their manufacturing.
Oh, okay.
This is a nuance within our ordinance, this light versus heavy. These are your prototypical industrial park users, right? Is a processing plant like this, or some
Yeah.
kind of Versus heavy manufacturing, you know, I think of it differently, but we define it as chemical process, or
Well,
chemical mixing, chemical
I
processing.
think of heavy, you know, potential for more nuisance for the public,
Right.
you know, in terms of smells and noise and parking and whatnot, and potential waste as well. Whereas light, I think it was something more contained and less of a nuisance, right?
Right.
So in that regard, you know, their proposed chemical mixing, is it gonna have any smell, any odor at all?
My understanding is no, but again, it's all self-contained and it's gonna be required to have the proper ventilation.
And they do show on here that, from what I can understand of it, I mean, I think that they do have some of that even showing on here. In that, between the ventilation and the fact that they know,
Right.
No, certainly the spill, entrapment
Yeah.
system that they have is great.
Here's all the storage is internal then?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they have
it's a
no
very
external-
self-contained building.
They have no external storage.
So because we're possibly granting a CUP for the entire building, will building codes be reviewed on the entire building, since they've already been doing this type of work?
So they're trying to build this standalone, but it is connected, so it's gonna be reviewed
Okay.
as it relates. I think to the extent that it's applicable,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Because, and I don't know if it's this business or not, but to your point, it does often smell in the summer, that you can smell the plastics, and I
Yes.
don't know if it's Proto Labs or if it's this building,
I
but
don't know either.
it'd be interesting that if they've been doing this and we weren't aware of it, if there's any building codes that maybe weren't up to code. I don't
Okay.
know. I
I-
don't know if it's this building,
Yeah,
but.
if you could look into or ask them about the smells, since
Mhm.
you're right, it's not uncommon to have smell of plastic in the air.
Really?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would agree. I think when you start, if we're gonna approve 63,000 square feet for use that they grandfathered in, however
Yeah.
you wanna put that, they're great neighbors, not saying anything that way, but is their venting capable, current, on the 61,000 square foot building? That would be a big consideration. The other question I have is, this building's attached only by a corridor. Is there a ballistics component to the construction?
There's a certain fire rating separation that they have to achieve by this, and they are,
They
Um,
show.
they're doing that
Yeah, they
in
show some of that.
these,
They show the fire rating, but is there any ballistic or explosive, because they're not connecting it, is why I'm asking, why they wouldn't have
There's-
connected it.
So I don't know the answer in total. There's I don't know the answer to that. I tried to ask the question if there was any, like, issue, and they're really aware of the building code regulations as it relates to the materials that they're gonna be processing within this addition. And I think it comes back to a fire rating more so than a ballistic.
Okay.
But I don't know that because that starts
There's,
to get
they,
into the building
on,
code.
on the one that says main level floor plan, A100,
Yeah. this
they
one.
have a, oh, I just lost it, hold on. They talk about the fire door. And all around, I mean, they've got, the fire door itself is only 45 minutes. And some of the other, I thought, was up to 2 hours.
Well, they have two doors. I don't know if you noticed that. I can't tell if those are overhead doors that are motorized, meaning they come down, which I think is what they are. Just based on the drawing, but if you look here, there's a 45-minute fire door,
Yeah.
and then there's a 180-minute fire door. So that,
Yes.
they separate that corridor off pretty extensively from, the rest of the building.
So, so that's part of my question, is they're isolating the space
Right.
uniquely.
Why? Why are they doing that? Why do they need
Now,
an addition?
My understanding is why they're doing that is to meet current building codes on this type of chemical processing. They would have to either maybe bring up the standard in the rest of the building, and so.
My guess is yes,
You see this a lot where, they don't really
Right.
wanna
do that.
upgrade the rest of the
The whole
building.
building, so easier to do a small addition than it is to upgrade the whole building.
Right.
Well, then, letting them know that getting the CUP, you know, that we would be interested in knowing what the rest of the building, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard to go back now, and in particular, I mean, smell of plastics,
Mhm.
I understand, but I also don't think that since we haven't asked that of even Proto Labs and the others that might be down there, to make everything be their responsibility or implying that it's them doing it, and maybe it is, but you can't, I mean, the horses are out of the barn, you can't necessarily go back right now. I mean, there are ways that we can kind of bring them in, but, and tell them that, you know,
I think the condition from the planning commission, and we can vet this, because I think it's a good point, we can vet this between now and the city council meeting is, let's define the uses within the existing building by square footage and then by a better description, if it's polymer, mix, whatever, or if it is another chemical processing, or if it's just, you know, maybe they're packaging some materials as well. So like in their breakdown that they gave me of the uses, they have, you know, about 10,000 square feet of office, they have 40,000 square feet of manufacturing, and they have about 13,000 square feet of warehouse. They define this as manufacturing, just like they define the 40,000 square feet. So
yeah.
that was my understanding, is they have manufacturing similar to this in the rest of or in a big piece of that building, and then they do have some warehousing, and they do have some other. But I think we can define that in the conditional use. I think then we could add a provision also that says, the city will, review and ensure that all applicable codes, including building codes, are being, met by the applicant. It's not to say that, I don't know, maybe the building code doesn't
Yeah, cover that,
retroactively
yeah.
apply to the rest of the building, but we can at least understand that.
Yeah.
And if it does, it will be reviewed.
And it would be a process to work with them if something's not up. It's not like we're gonna shut them down.
Right.
We've worked with other businesses
Yeah.
in
But
the
I
process.
do think that part of the reason that they want this separate is that they don't want to apply current building codes to the existing one.
And so the building code's pretty specific on what triggers
Yeah.
the whole building having to be upgraded versus, just like our site plan review
Mhm.
says, you know, 15% of the building is
Yes.
being altered or whatever, or expanded by 15%, then you have to bring the rest of it up. Building code's same way,
Yeah.
so, yeah. But I think we can cover that, and then I think before it gets in front of the city council, we can have that question at least better defined and better answered, so that the resolution could reflect that if the council chose to approve it.
Okay.
So tonight you're asking for approval of the 2,000 square foot addition or the 63,000 square foot addition?
No, so I'm asking for approval of the 2,000 square foot addition from a
Addition.
site plan
Mhm.
and a conditional use
Use
permit to
permit, yeah.
allow heavy manufacturing on this property.
On the entire property?
Yeah, and but on the entire property, based on what's the existing use of the current building today, plus the 2,000 square foot addition. And then I think we can capture that so that any sale of this building or any intensification of that use triggers an amendment to the conditional use permit versus memorializing just kind of
Do whatever you
open-ended,
want.
whatever,
Yeah.
whatever falls under our definition.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions or concerns
Good
or
question.
wonders or?
I wish I knew more, to be honest. We've been trying to get as much as we can, and the architects are really great at telling us as much as they can, but they don't, the guy that I'm talking to on this project's in Connecticut. You know, so this isn't, you know, the corporate people who deal with projects, and they don't have those people in this building.
Okay.
They've got a different level that is working in this building. So it's just, that's the disconnect.
Have any idea how this company from Germany ended up here?
I don't know. I mean, if you look at their website, they have an extensive portfolio of what they do. I mean, they're pretty sophisticated in a lot of areas. They're a fairly large company, but I don't know how they got to Maple Plain, Minnesota with a 60,000 square foot manufacturing plant. Yeah, but they're all over it. I was trying to do some research on them because I was curious who these guys were, and they're big, and they, you know, it's not like I just looked it up and there's, you know, 2 sites or something. So, I mean, it's kind of neat that they're, you know, we've got a good group of businesses in that industrial park. So, between, you know, our local Proto Labs and these guys, but.
Yeah, Proto Labs has certainly moved up in the world since they started.
Yeah, I mean, that's a extensive business now.
Well, what, oops. Oh, there they are. Does this become, if we add what we would like them, or to define the, kind of the definition of what they do, is that its
Kind of
own
the
little
definition.
separate number, or is it a part of?
And then the building code then.
Yeah, so no, I think it's gonna be its own
part of-
number, so.
Okay, that's what I.
The conditional use permit will include the following conditions. A would be the applicant shall complete all improvements to the building and site as indicated on the approved building and site plans.
Mhm.
And then we'd add B and C.
Okay.
B would be, heavy manufacturing will be limited to, the following areas, and we'll define the square footages.
The chemical
Okay.
Yeah,
products.
and then we'll be limited to chemical product processing or if I can define that better, I will, but I'll try to do it. Maybe John, our attorney,
Mhm.
can work with me a little bit. So I'll define that into chemical product processing, and then I'll say and then that condition will say any intensification of that use will require the review and approval, or I think I'll say require an amendment to the conditional use permit, and then I'll say no other heavy manufacturing as defined by city ordinance, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So I'll word it that way, will be permitted.
Okay.
So that way, it's gonna be pretty tight to, now, is there a loophole in that? Sure, somebody could come in and say, well, I do chemical mixing, you know, so, but then we'd probably be okay with it if it's
Yeah.
the same, right?
Yeah.
So that will be B, and then,
So that would be 2?
no, it will be
3B.
3B.
Yep.
And then what was the,
Kind of the, having the facility meet and.
oh, yeah, so then the C would be,
That
the
are
city will ensure
applicable.
that all applicable, permits
Yeah.
and including MPCA, or I have like a standard boilerplate that says state regulatory,
Yes.
federal regulatory.
Yes, that would work.
And then applicable building code.
Yeah. Yeah, because that
So I've-
throws them all in there.
We've done a similar thing, and then it's like everything, you know, so then if they violate that, what's nice about that is if, say, we had a plastic smell somewhere and somebody complained and we investigated, and we went out there and found that they don't have the right scrubber on their one
the air,
ventilation
yeah.
system, then we could revoke the CUP.
Okay. Okay.
So those would be the two, so it'd be
Mhm.
3A, 3B, 3C would be in there, and then we'd have 4, which is the conditional use permit fine schedule. That's one of our newer conditions we've been adding to conditional use permits, but.
It's pretty minimal in terms of fees or costs. I mean, I understand the purpose and intent and agree completely, but I was looking at it going, $500?
Well, at any time it can be revoked. This is just another option.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
true. Thank
This
you,
is an
Nicole. That's good.
incentive to the property owner, and the fee schedule we have here, yeah, maybe these guys don't care about that, but we have other businesses where 500 or even 3 or 4 is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's more just a, like, little poke to say, come on,
Yeah.
we're serious,
Well,
can you
and-
help,
yeah,
can you get it
and-
done, you know?
And I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Okay, Well, then the recommendation would be that we would agree or think that it's a good idea to send this to city council, and if they meet all of these requirements, it would be okay. Okay, well, what do people think?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
all those in favor? Aye. Okay, all right.
Great, this will go to city council on the
22nd.
22nd.
And I always think, just as an aside or an afterthought, I always think that it serves the companies better if there is a representative that shows up. And I understand and appreciate their position, but maybe it's something that they could, I had in my job description a line that said, "and other duties as defined."
Yeah.
Okay, this could be someone's, occasional, 3% other duties as defined, show up at city council if somebody has a question.
Could be a supervisor from
Yeah.
the building, right?
You know.
Not necessarily an executive, but somebody who knows what's going on there.
Yeah. And so when we met, this is typical, we're a small town, right? So this is typical, hey, we want to start this project probably the 1st of April. And that was the 1st of March. That's our time frame. We've got these plans and we've already got a contractor on board and they've already soft bid the project and they're ready to go. And so we said, oh, well, geez, you're not going to be able to do that. And then, of course, our schedule technically was the May Planning Commission meeting because we have this 30-day requirement. And they were like, well, so we were, we try to be accommodating to our businesses, and say, okay, how can we make it work? So we scrambled. I think we published a public hearing notice like the next day.
Yeah.
And they
And I
promised
saw it,
us their
yeah.
application and they promised us plans, but even that, so they got the application in and then, we were like, we need plans. And so then they got us a site plan and I'm like, I need more than the site plan. And then, so we got the plans on Monday. And that's why, the final, they had been sending me some stuff, but not everything. And so we try, and
No, and
so I
I
always
understand that.
we always try to balance this. And so then what I learned though on Monday was the gentleman who had come in, met, and was the project rep. So Shingaby Builders, you guys have seen
Yeah.
them. That's
Yeah.
who's building this. Their project manager, this is his client, their project, left that company, took another job. And so they're now scrambling to get a new project manager on board, and they have somebody who's kind of filling, who's like, okay, I guess it's my project, but he has no idea. So then I was back to this architect and engineer. This is the structural engineer that I'm actually dealing with, and because he's the one who's got at least all the information or can get it. So, we try, but it's that kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And so this one's been this real fast, like, how do we get you guys what you need and still try to help you keep your schedule, so.
Okay.
All the more reason to be
Have
present.
some-
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't feel as bad about this as, there have been a couple times where people haven't showed up, and quite frankly, for me, it's like, okay, I'm not impressed by that, so it kind of
Yeah.
gets me off.
Yeah, I agree.
But, so, okay, excellent, thank you. Well,
Good work.
Motion to adjourn? That's all you gotta do.
I'll make a motion.
second? Why don't you
Second.
second, okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, all.
Right.
Ah.
Your documents, I'm just curious. Do you know what those icons mean? There's like one on each of those buildings and then there's like one randomly